Hey everybody, Peter Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. Today's episode is where we go back down the health road, not just because of COVID, but we like to try to work on keeping ourselves healthy and finding new mindsets to try to invest in our future, because it turns out we're all living longer than we used to. So with that, we thought we'd get Peter Joosten on, Joosten. And we had a little bit of technical difficulty as we tried to sort through the show. It was the beginning of COVID and the internet was terrible. So there's a little bit of a glitchiness. And I actually am not in a lot of this episode because our internet just could not support the show. So we have Damien driving the bus, doing most of the hosting. And then, of course, Peter is an international speaker on longevity and wellness and, trying to, live to be, he's talking about the theoretic ability that him and guys like Peter Thiel and Peter Diamandis are talking about, where we can outlive like 300 years plus. So we're reaching that time medically where we will be able to have much more control over the longevity of our life. So when I say we're living longer, these guys are saying 3 times, 4 times longer than what we do now, and basically living indefinitely, which who knows if that's a good idea, but it's fascinating to think about. And when you start to add in things like the neural net and all of these things like Elon Musk is talking about with chips and making your brain work at a higher level and all of these things, oh my God, it's pretty crazy. And so it's good to explore this stuff so we can start to get an idea of what the future might look like. And so I think that's why Peter's such a great guest. And I would love to have him on to really get a chance to bring him into the workshop here and lean on him some more and really press him, maybe with another guest, and just get a lot out of him, because we just scratched the surface with what this guy knows and what he does. So look for more from Peter coming out. Thanks again, Damien. Every time he produces an episode, it's fantastic. He recently brought us Neil Fallon from Clutch. So he hits big home runs. I know you're going to enjoy that part of the show. Hey, speaking of the show, it's great if you support the show via buying shirts, I think I'm going live to shirts today, so take a look at that. But also if you buy books through the links that we put up, or if you want a link for an Amazon, like, hey, we're going to buy TV on Amazon, Pete, send us a link. I'm glad to do that. I will send you the link. If you're going to take the time to do that, I'm glad to send it to you. So we are definitely an Amazon affiliate. I'm working on getting a permanent link that you can buy something from them. You can always just click on our link first. I know that's a pain in the ass, but if you want to support us, that is a way to do it. If you want to watch on YouTube, we're monetizable now. And even though I think we're just about to crack $1 on the YouTube monetization scale, not kidding. These are ways to support us. Telling friends, listening, getting into a conversation and linking in a show that we put up, all that stuff helps. So anything you can do helps. And also I'm going to be going on the road soon. So I may put out a bit of a GoFundMe thing and take some money on the road and go out and create a bunch of content. So we'll see. Big things coming. Lots of projects on the line. We have a date. I believe it's going to be July 15th. Now, that is a tentative date, but we are going live with Prison Chronicles in July. So come hell or high water, that's coming out. It's just a matter of what day that's going to happen and how many episodes drop instantly. Everything's basically in the can. It's all being polished now. All right, I've taken too much time in this intro, so I'm just going to say this real quick. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. Get it, do it, love it. Bye.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Peter Joosten, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Glad to have Peter Joosten today. He's a biohacker, podcaster from Netherlands. This is our first guest from Netherlands, so I'm excited to have Peter. Peter, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Damien, and Pete, of course, to have me in your show. It's an honor to be here.
How are things right now in the Netherlands during this pandemic period we are stuck in? Do you have some sort of a lockdown or something?
Yeah, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands calls it a so-called intelligent lockdown. So there are no armed forces on the street or something like that. And we're still allowed to go to the supermarket and also to go out for a run, etc. Yeah, but for the rest, social life and interaction, they all came to a halt. So it's I think it's the same also like everywhere in the world. As expect for some countries that are still doing the things they're doing, but in Netherlands it's pretty quiet on the street.
Yeah, are people going to work or they mostly stay home?
Well, most of the people here, it depends. So there are a lot of, or there's some occupations that are classified as like it's really important that these people go to work. Like, of course, healthcare,
Yes.
also the primary schools for the children of the people in these healthcare facilities. But there are also a lot of people just like me that try to work from home. And that's, I think, the situation here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I guess there's the situation in the whole world right now, but all that we can do is hope probably and see where it goes.
Yeah. I think there's a part hope. What I find interesting is that compared to, I'm not an expert in this field, but compared to other pandemics, like the speed in which the genetic profile of the virus was sequenced and then shared on the world, I think that's also from my expertise that's really amazing to see. So it's also, interesting times, as I might say.
Yeah, I agree. But since we are talking about biohacking and transhumanism today, I wanted to ask you, do you think that biohackers can help develop any solutions about this coronavirus pandemic period?
Well, biohacking is a pretty broad term. So we have to make a distinction between some schools or groups or categories within biohacking. So you have a group called the lifestyle optimizers, and maybe Pete knows them, but there's actually a guy from the United States that kind of pioneered the term biohacking or made it commercial. That guy is called Dave Asprey. He's the CEO of a brand called Bulletproof, and you can order special coffee at his company, so-called Bulletproof coffee. And then you mix that coffee with butter and MCT oil, and that's a sort of super breakfast drink. I don't know. Did you hear about the Bulletproof coffee, Pete? Did you ever drink it?
Yeah, I drink it all the time. It's interesting and definitely fills you up.
Yeah. So that's one field of biohacking, and these people in this domain are looking at how can we boost our immune system. So I'm following that, like how what do they suggest? What certain types of amino acids or vitamins or minerals just to boost your immune system and be more healthy. But another part, I think it's more interesting. These are so-called biohackers that think that they can develop a vaccine by themselves in an open source manner, just the way as in software that we were developing Linux or Wikipedia or Bitcoin. So you work together in open source community. And there's also biohackers who say, well, we can also work together in the same way on a vaccine against the COVID-19 virus. But I'm a little more skeptical about their initiatives because I think you have to go through all the trials, clinical trials, and also the acceptance of the general public. Like if there's a vaccine made by some biohackers, like if you're hacking a computer, I think that's one thing. But like really making a vaccine and offering that to patients, I think that's an all other ballgame. And so that's the reason why I think that really biohackers are developing their own vaccines. I'm a little bit skeptical. What I find interesting is that people are making medical equipment, like using 3D printers to make parts, etc. So that's I think that's an awesome thing to see.
Yeah, we couldn't do that 10 years before. So yeah, the 3D printers and everything that is going into to help develop any sort of protection, masks, or even some companies that were developing cars or anything are now focused on respiratory machines or, I don't know, toilet paper maybe or something like that. But, so we are all together to fight this visible enemy. Yeah, let's put that aside because we are not experts in this thing. So let's get back to your childhood. What was Peter like as a kid, and when did you find your interests in the idea of biohacking and transhumanism?
Well, it was not that I was a little kid and then I decided to become a biohacker or transhumanist, because I think at the time the term was not even known by then. But what I did notice lately is when I was young, I wanted to become a biologist. So I sort of was interested in plants and animals and also bacteria and how they worked. And I also wanted to become a deep sea diver, like Jacques Cousteau. I don't know if you know him. He's a French guy with he was going through all the. I wanted to become that when I would grow up. And also something else, I don't know, when you were young, did you want to become, or maybe also at this moment, did you want to become a superhero or an action hero?
Superhero, I think. I was a big fan of Batman.
Batman, yeah. I also like Batman. So when I was young, I liked to play soldier in the woods. But I was not really a good soldier, but I had like a fantasy that I have like a sort of Inspector Gadget kind of skills or Batman kind of capabilities. And for a long while, I went to primary school, secondary school, and to university. And, you kind of get older and more serious. And I kind of forgot about the fantasies I had. But then 5 years ago, of course, I still was looking going to the cinema and watch the Avengers and all the latest Batman movies. So I like that. But what was interesting is that actually the way I got in contact with biohacking and transhumanism was via self-tracking. So self-tracking is also sort of preamble to this field of biohacking and transhumanism, because I started to go out for a run or go cycling. And then I used a sports watch to track my heart rate and speed and that kind of thing. And then I found out there are a lot of, at the time, and also now even more, a lot of apps and gadgets and wearables to measure all kinds of things in your life. And that's called the Quantified Self. And I started to write about that and blog about it. And after a while, friends said to me, well, Peter, it's interesting that you track and monitor and measure all these things, but what can you actually do with it? And then I came across the term biohacking with like a podcast in the United States, and there was a summit in Helsinki in Finland, Europe. And then I dived deep into that field. So I'm not trained as a biotechnologist or something like that. I'm just, an autodidact. I don't know, it's also an English word, just interested in myself and started writing about it and speaking, giving keynotes about it. So that's how it went.
Biohacking enthusiast, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. It's not like a term, just like a doctor, where you really have to go through an education. So I think everybody can call himself a biohacker or yourself a transhumanist. But I'm, I'm a biohacker.
Okay. What exactly is biohacking? Can you explain to the listeners at home what exactly is the meaning of the word biohacking?
Yeah, sure. To give you a little bit of context, the term biohacking consists, of course, of two elements, bio and hacking. And sometimes people say, oh, you're doing cyber hacking, black hat hacking, like breaking into somebody's computer or something. But that's not really the use of the term biohacking. The term biohacking is every era kind of looks at the human body based on the dominant paradigm of that time. To give you an example, the ancient Greeks, they were doing a lot with water and irrigation and aqueducts, etc. And they also had the so-called law of humoris, which means that the health of a person is dependent on a balance of 4 bodily fluids. There you can see the resemblance between the dominant technology at the time and the way they look at the human body. And there are also later in time some other examples. And now we are, of course, in the era of computer technology and information technology. And that's also why a lot of people think of as the human body as a computer, like, I really need to upgrade myself or I need to download that information. So you can also see the use of that metaphor in our natural language. And that's also where the term biohacking originates, because people were saying, well, we know more and more about the human body. So we can hack into the body, just like where you can extend the memory of your computer or make it faster or maybe add some functions. And we can do the same thing to the human body. So that's where the term biohacking originates, like using biology and technology to change, alter, improve, upgrade the human body. That's the definition of biohacking I like to use.
Okay, and you have a chip in your left hand, as I discovered. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
How that works exactly, and how do you use it? That sort of technology.
That's, as you can say, a sort of subgroup within the biohackers. These are the so-called grinders or cyborgs. I'm a sort of cyborg, although there are also some people who say we are all cyborgs, like we are now communicating with each other for over hundreds of kilometers, and we're using technology also to augment and extend our capabilities. But these grinders, they say, well, we can adjust or make the human body better by using implantables, for example. And I was curious, just how does that feel to have an electronic device in my body? How do other people respond? What do they think? Because I think in a way, it could be a future, like technology is getting smaller and smaller, and we are not only wearing it on our bodies, but maybe the next step is that it will be in our clothes, for example. And the next step after that is that we'll be putting it into our body.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that putting electronics in our body, it's not that strange. Like in healthcare, we're using it with pacemakers and hearing implants, for example. But then using technology just for fun, putting it in your body, that's people respond different to that, you might say. But your question was, what do I do with it? I have my contact information on it, so I can scan myself, or you can scan me when we meet, and you have my contact information. So it's not like a really big breakthrough at the moment, but I was just curious, how does it feel? How do other people respond, etc.
How long will it last in your body before your body kicks it out or breaks it or whatever?
The type of chip I have can stay in forever. As long as I'm going, as long as I'm living. It's made by a company that serves all people all around the world, and it's also protected with bioglass. So they say it stays within the body, and it's also not leaking any chemicals or etc. So it could be the moment I die that it's still there.
Okay, so let's say a giant corporation like Elon Musk's Neuralink merge our brain with AI, which on paper sounds really good, but how can we be sure that in reality he or some future CEO to that company will not take advantage of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the audience listening, the chip I have, it's pretty innocent. I think it's just for fun. But the most advanced visions in this field are people who are thinking about brain chips. And there are companies like Cornell and also Neuralink, which made the cover, I think, a couple of months ago. Because not only because Elon Musk is involved, and everything Elon Musk does gets a lot of media attention, whatever you think about the guy. And the vision of the company Neuralink is that they say, well, we start with making brain chips to help people with a certain neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer or Parkinson's, etc. But their ultimate vision, at least by Elon Musk, but also some other visionaries, is they say, well, now in the beginning, we want to use it to help people, patients to get better. But in the future, we can use it to merge our brains with artificial intelligence. So let's assume for the moment that we have the technology right now. Then at this moment, you could be just going through your Instagram feed in your head, or just go to Wikipedia to check if I'm right, or I don't know if it's going to work. And I'm more hesitant to that. Like if you asked me this question like a couple of years ago, I would say, oh yeah, no problem. Elon Musk, I'm the first one. But now I think, I'm not. Technology companies do not have like a perfect record on items like privacy and the use of data and that kind of thing. So I think I will be more hesitant right now just to put a brain chip in my head, and that commercial company just can see everything maybe I'm thinking of, or the dreams I have, or the intentions I have. So but it's really fascinating to think about the idea. And in a way, I also admire the visionary idea, because it's like a whole new way of communicating, if it's ever going to work. Because now I have the idea in my head, and I have to transcribe that into language, and then it it comes in your earphones and then to the people who are listening, and they also have to then describe it to their thoughts. So it's a pretty long, messy
Process,
process. So that idea, I think it's really interesting, but I'm a little hesitant. What about you, Damien? Do you want to have such a brain chip?
Well, I think it's early for that. But if any type of encryption is granted, I think it's a good idea. But how can we trust that there's an encryption in those brain headsets or surgeries or whatever you call it?
Yeah.
What about Pete? What do you think about Neuralink on
I
Elon
like to
Musk?
be a pioneer in some things, but I don't know if I want to be a pioneer in brain chipping. I'm glad to let the market sort itself out, because you can only do so many things well in the front. I just wouldn't know enough to make a good decision about it. So, I think the people that are passionate about it, that it's like really, really important, they should go first. Like the first folks to go to Mars are taking enormous risks, but that's what their life is about. And then once it's like a cruise ship, then great, let's all go to Mars. But for the right now, I don't need a chip in my brain. I'm good.
Okay, cool. You wrote a book called Biohacking, the Future of the Makeable Human. Can you tell more about that? And do you plan on writing a new one, or maybe you work on that right now?
Yeah, my book is now only published in Dutch, so I don't know how many Dutch listeners you have, but yeah, I will share this podcast, so you get probably some more. But I'm now working on an English translation of the book.
Okay, awesome.
So I will send you a copy when it's actually finished. I now have more time with the Corona outbreak, because normally I do a lot of keynote presentations, so I can now work on the book translation. And the book it gives an overview of the different definitions there are on biohacking, and also the distinction in technologies. So we talked about the neurotechnology with the brain chips that's on the far edge on the, let's say, if it's feasible, if it's also here in the next coming years. And there's also about some other technologies. So I talked about the self-tracking, the quantified self, which we are probably already using, or at least a large portion of the audience that are listening. And there's a whole field in between, like also the use of genetic testing, but also genetic modification. You can also talk about the use of prostheses or exoskeletons. So I made a sort of description about how far are these technologies and how is research progressing. And then also parts about how will it impact the educational system, companies, not only to develop new products or services, but also for their own employees, but also what's the impact on the healthcare institutions, maybe also on society, because you can also, of course, think about what if a certain population, a part of the population has a brain chip and their IQ is plus 1,000. Do you also get like a difference in society between the brain chips and the normal people or something? So these are also a lot of ethical questions I consider and write about in my book.
Okay, awesome. I hope that you will translate the book sooner and we'll have a good read on it.
Yeah, that's great.
I saw a lecture of yours where you talk about longevity. Can you explain more about that? And why should we wait until 2036, according to Peter Diamandis?
Yeah, Peter Diamandis is also a guy from the States, just like Pete and Dave. I see Pete nodding, so he also knows Peter Diamandis. And he made also some daring predictions about the future. And one thing, because biohacking, of course, you can think about augmenting the body to improve your cognition, where we talked about with the brain chips, for example. You can also think about improving your physical capabilities. So maybe also with use of doping, which is sort of biohacking. You can run faster or for a longer period of time or jump higher, etc. But of course, you can also think about how can you treat the body or impact the body so you can extend your longevity. And that's the field of anti-aging, longevity. And Peter Diamandis made a prediction that around 2030 or 2035, we will reach human longevity escape velocity, which means in that year, with the progress in science and medical healthcare, we can get you longer alive than you are actually getting older. So in a way, you're spinning off. So if we are alive by then, you can become way older than we are now used to. So for everybody listening and want to believe that, just stay healthy. Do not get the virus until 2035. So I think these are interesting ideas, and not only on the different technologies, because and this is also a fascinating field, by the way, the people who are thinking of genetic modification to increase their lifespan, or using certain pharmaceuticals, or also looking at stem cell treatments. Well, you can do a lot of things in this field, but what I'm mostly interested in about is what happens to like our pension funds we have in you also familiar with, or the welfare state, or do we have it's also strange that you go to school till the age of, I don't know, 22, and then you work from age 22 till, I don't know, 300 or something. So these are, and are you in the same relationship for 5 years? So I think if this is going to happen, it also will mean a lot of changes in social and cultural and all these kinds of systems. So that's what fascinates me a lot.
What is the idea behind longevity? Does it says that we're going to have a longer life by 10 years or 20, or we are going to be immortal in some way?
The most optimistic thinkers in this domain, like Aubrey de Grey, he looks a little bit, sorry, Aubrey, if you're listening, he looks a little bit like Dumbledore from Harry Potter. So he's a guy from England with a large beard. And he says, well, the first person to become 1,000 years old has already been born. But I think that's pretty optimistic. So I'm not sure, because maybe we also get like other events like the coronavirus, which also for a lot of people came also from an unexpected direction. But let's say a more optimistic, but not as optimistic as Aubrey de Grey, prediction would be that we can become like 160 or 180 years old, maybe in the next coming of decades. So I think that's still like the doubling of what we are used to now. So this also would mean a lot of change. But like that we really can become immortal, I think then we have to think about these ideas of brain uploading, which is also in the field of transhumanism. Like you can maybe live forever if you analyze the content of your brain and then emulate it and upload it in a computer. Or these are, but I'm more skeptical about these kinds of ideas.
Can we see the transhumanism in the future as a political ideology, or only philosophically?
Well, in the United States, it's already political. Maybe Pete, do you know the Sultan Istvan?
Yeah, I would say if it's going to be political, it's going to reside on the left side of our political spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
They're ones that are doing that, but it's not really part of the conversation day to day. We're worried more on like the big social problems, medical care, retirement, these kinds of things. And if we're going to live to be 160, we really got to figure out, like, we all got to work longer, like we can't quit when we're 62, It's not going to work.
Yeah, that's correct. And what's interesting that what Pete is saying is that, for one, that these ideas are not part of the political debate yet, also not in Netherlands, by the way. So we're focusing on day-to-day issues and scandals and these kinds of things. And of course, right now, the coronavirus, and I can totally understand that. Yeah. But what's in the United States, there was already an independent politician for the so-called Transhumanist Party, and his name is Sultan Istvan, and he actually was also touring, and his ideas is we need to invest more money in science and technology, so we can all have, I don't know, probably he also said like all Americans should have chips implanted in their head or something. But I think he's not like really believed that he could go against Trump, or I don't know, what's the Democratic candidate right now, Sanders or Biden.
There's a guy that needs a chip right there. That guy needs an upgrade. Just a joke.
Yeah. So it's not part of a political debate yet, but maybe in the future we can see more of that coming.
Yeah, definitely. I think that this part or this process actually is inevitable, but I don't know if should the government put regulations on biohacking to your own body, or maybe the corporations will see about it. But I don't know which is worse. So
yeah, I'm not sure. I think we'll see these scenarios play out. What I think it's interesting, if you're talking about genetics and genetic modification, you see in all different, and I don't like to generalize too much, but you see another perspective, at least in Asian countries, on the ideas of upgrading or altering or changing. So it was also, I think, not that much of a surprise that the first persons that were born, which were genetically modified as an embryo, so they were born as a baby, were in China, because there's another, so that it would be interesting to see if the current economic paradigms, like just say very broadly, in the United States is more based on capitalism and companies, and in China it's more from above, from the state, from the government, and I don't know, Europe is somewhere, I don't know, behind or in the middle. So to see how these things are going to play out. But so on that side, I'm pessimistic, but I can also see that the WHO and also at least in the Netherlands and also in Belgium and also in the UK, there are some institutions that are really thinking about the long-term implications on genetics, biotechnology, these kinds of issues. But to really get it from the think tanks, etc., to the Senate and to the mainstream politics, I think that's still difficult.
Yeah. And can we see biohacking medically dangerous?
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Can we see biohacking medically dangerous?
Yeah, I think so. There is a documentary on Netflix, A Natural Selection, which is about a certain subgroup of biohackers which are using genetic modification to treat themselves or upgrade themselves. And there's one guy in that group that also has passed because of doing some experiment on himself. So like the tiny chip in my hand, I think, that's not really life-threatening. But you can go too far with certain biohacking techniques. In the lifestyle side of biohacking, there was also a person that died by doing certain breathing exercises and then going into a shallow pool. Maybe you know the Wim Hof method. He's about the use of your breath, and then you can go into cold water. And there was also somebody who passed out after going into the water. So I think just like everything, also in sports, etc., you have to also use your mind before you do too extreme experiments.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, when you look at biohacking and performance, it's sort of like in the caveman days with performance-enhancing drugs with what's about to happen. At some point, we just lose the ability to control for all of the variables that someone might do to their body. How do you see biohacking and transhumanism impacting professional and Olympic grade sports?
Yeah, great question. I think sports by itself is already a room for experiments for society as a whole. I know you in the States like other types of sports, but I like to look at cycling, for example, with the Tour de France. Of course, Lance Armstrong also won 7 times before before he confessed at Oprah, I think. But that's a nice example where you make agreements with each other, like this is legal, this is not legal. And on a greater scale, we will do that. We already are doing that in society. And in a way, it can be beneficial if you are willing and trying and to surpass these borders and do illegal things, especially in sports where the stakes are that high. So And what's interesting is I interviewed a professor lately who was looking in genetic doping. So that's a whole different, a new field. Like, so when you change some of your genes and then your body makes more red blood cells by itself, for example. How can you track that? So maybe in the next, it's not that I heard that any of the athletes are already doing that, but that scientists and the Olympic Committee are interested in it makes me feel that maybe there are some rumors that athletes are doing that. So that will be interesting to follow. And there's last thing I want to add to this is that there are also some people who say, now we have the Paralympics and the regular Olympics. Maybe in the future, we also should have a Techno-Olympics where everything goes, for example, and we have the most weird kind of upgrades. So I don't know if you want to do that, but that's an interesting thought.
That was one of the thoughts I had is at some point, someone's going to, like a lot of our sports tests, like biking tests VO2 max primarily. Like if you have an elite, hyper rare amongst rare people, high VO2 max, you're going to have a competitive advantage. And that's why everybody's trying to get to that point. So do you have a Formula One kind of level of competition where we find a person who's got the qualities that we need for our sport, biking, and then we just build that person out, and just put everything they need to be able to, like, you don't need to carry a radio anymore. It's implanted. I don't know. You could detune the lactic acid response in the brain. Things like this at the Formula One level for a human, but is that ethical?
Yeah. It's what we decide what is ethical and what's not ethical. So, it will be. I think it's also interesting that there are also still some sports in which you also need of course, it's always a nature nurture debate. Of course, like. If we're talking Formula One, you have like amazing drivers which were also in a little go-kart the moment they were 3 years old. But it's maybe someday we also decipher the genes of Lionel Messi, how great of a football player he is, or the genes of Max Verstappen, the driver from the Netherlands. Yeah. So it's interesting times concerning the use of these kinds of methods in sports.
What if we took that to the battlefield now and we started making stormtroopers?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. You probably also are familiar with the work of DARPA. You know DARPA?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not. I don't know them directly, but I see a lot of publications, and then DARPA is really on the cutting edge. They were also with the internet like back in the day. So it's really a domain in which I'm looking, because just like sports in army, it's also a matter of life or death. If you're stronger, if you need less sleep, if you, I don't know, they're also looking at brain computer interfacing for the drone pilots and air striker pilots. So there's definitely a lot of willingness and also a lot of funds at the army just to also look at these technologies to use them for sort of super soldiers, like what I wanted to become when I was young.
Tell us more about your podcast. You have a podcast. It's in Dutch mostly.
Yeah.
But you have some interviews in English. Can you translate that to us in few sentences? Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to tell about my podcast is that I started as like really interested in lifestyle optimization. So I interviewed experts on the domains of meditation and also spirituality, and also eating the right kinds of diets, etc. But at some point I decided, well, I'm really interested in the biohacking part. So I'm now mostly interviewing scientists and also thought leaders in this field. So there's a podcast coming up with Jamie Metzel. He wrote a book, Hacking Darwin. He's from the United States. And I also interviewed Michael Bess. He's a professor at the University of Tennessee, and he also wrote a book about the use of or how you become superhumans. So if there are like English-speaking authorities in this field, I will also invite them to my podcast. Then after a short Dutch introduction, I will have the interview in English. Yeah. But for me, and I think it's also for you, I don't know if you, how do you see it, but podcast is a really nice way just to meet such amazing, interesting people.
Definitely.
Just that's the benefits me the most.
Definitely.
Present company included. That's
Oh, thank you.
One of the things I want to ask you about, when we look at the future and what's coming, how far is this future off? Like what are we talking here? I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the series on HBO, but I think it's called Years After Years or Year and Years. And they're like, all of these things are part of the storyline is, quantum computing does come online here in the next 12 years. And, embedding chips and having a phone in your hand. Hello. That stuff's all in that storyline, as it's barely in the future at all. So what do you see? Like, what's that timeline?
Always difficult because it's sometimes you see some lines in the past and you want to get them to the future, and it's not like a linear line. Sometimes it goes down, and technologies also can influence each other, or some cultural or social or even religious factors can also influence the application of a certain technology. But what I like a quote by an American futurist, the late Roy Amara. He used to say, well, most of the times we seem to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run, but we underestimate it in the long run. So it's not really biohacking, but let's say self-driving cars. Well, for years we are thinking that like next year there will be self-driving cars, and it takes pretty long. But the moment when they are there, it's a complete change of, do you need other infrastructure? You don't need a lot of parking spaces or lighting in the city. So I think like that also applies now to genetic modification and other biohacking technologies. Like I think some things will be pretty fast, like more and more genetic testing, for example. But like the moment we are really doing genetic modification, that will be, I don't know, if we ever allow that, will be, I think, in 5 or 10 years. But like the Elon Musk Neuralink scenarios, maybe we'll never get there. So it's difficult to say, but these are interesting times because science and technology are also progressing most of the times. Some scientists also have other priorities now with the coronavirus, but we are more willing to share information and develop new technologies. And there are these kinds of human guinea pigs that are also willing to test it on themselves. So I think we see these innovations progressing for the next couple of years.
Let me ask another question along these topics. So I've been reading a lot of Graham Hancock's work. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he looks at the prehistory of humans, and it got me thinking about the evolution theory. And evolution works great until an asteroid hits, and then everything's clean slated, right? And then you start again. So is this an asteroid-like event where if you don't keep up, you are no longer the fittest, and some middle-aged old guy like me, like if I refuse to do it, and my peers all of a sudden have, let's not even go to 1,000. Let's say they have 500 IQs or 300 IQs. Do I become obsolete and get pushed out of the way because, it's technology's a pretty big asteroid. It changes everything.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting idea. So I hope by that time, we as human species, we also still have a lot of compassion and values, and will not shove other not upgraded people aside. And then I also like what you see is, of course, that we also went from a Darwinian evolution based on natural selection. We are now more to going to an unnatural selection. So we are, as mankind, already pretty involved in changing evolution. And it could be that technology is a layer on top of that. And I like the analogy with an asteroid. Only the difference is, of course, we are now there and we are actively performing the asteroid. Maybe also the climate change is also a sort of asteroid which changes as human species. So it would be interesting to see how this plays out. Yeah.
Let people know how they can find more about Peter Joosten.
Yeah, if people are interested in this topic, they can go to superhumantalks.com. So superhuman and then talks and then one word.com. That's my English site, and I'm planning on to publish more on that. I also made a couple of YouTube videos, and now I'm also working on an online masterclass. So if the audience, people are listening, are interested in some elements on the different technologies, definitions, also impact on healthcare, etc., they can subscribe to the newsletter, and then in a couple of weeks I will publish the masterclass. So it would be awesome to see you there.
Awesome. Yeah, sure. Okay, so visit Peter at superhumantalks.com. And thank you, Peter. It was a pleasure to have you on the Break It Down show, and let's have you another time.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being at the show, and I really liked the conversation with you, Damian, and with you, Pete. So thank you.